This is the Fifth Estate winning headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning. But we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 21st of April, 2020, and I am 2J.
I'm Tom.
And I am GK, and in case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, when your country abandons you abroad. In the Standard, hostile takeover. And in the Star, why Kenyans may escape COVID-19 disaster.
Yes.
Studies are telling us. Let's start with the Standard.
Yes.
Hostile takeover.
Hostile takeover. And the Standard is saying that Ruto allies are accusing Uhuru Kenyatta's side of government. Can you imagine that? Uhuru Kenyatta's side of government of trying to occupy party positions in order to come into a coalition agreement.
I can imagine
with
it
RAILA
because it's happening.
It's and I mean, who would have thought in the last 3 years this would have happened?
Yeah.
But what's my point here? You see, I think what William Ruto should have done 2013 is to have a coalition agreement with Uhuru Kenyatta. Have 10 ministers, an instrument that actually backs him up. 10 ministers on URP side, 10 ministers from Uhuru Kenyatta side. That way he'd be able to negotiate right now. He would have a pull-out option in case there was in case of disagreement. But right now, the car that he bought in 2013 has no reverse. Has no reverse gears. It just moves forward, and therefore he cannot withdraw. His work will just going to be contained and to be put in a corner by Uhuru Kenyatta.
But he is right in moving forward because he formed this party with Uhuru Kenyatta, and the idea was, come 2022, you will hand over to me and I will run the party and we will keep moving. Now Uhuru is saying, we're not even having party elections, we're not doing anything of the sort. Why?
See, Uhuru Kenyatta, number one, has one thing, and it's called charm. But one thing, and
DP doesn't have charm?
No, DP has
what
charm,
does that
but
have to do with
Uhuru
anything?
Kenyatta's charm disarms everybody. It disarmed William Ruto to the point where he cannot be able to get into a coalition agreement.
I do agree with what GK is bringing up. I do not think that what the narrative is right now, that he's in a corner, that he's stuck, is true. I do not think that after years of investing his time and his energy and his money into this Jubilee story, that he would just give up. Let
me tell you, 2J, the Jubilee Party is not a publicly listed company, and I've told you this. If he wanted to be a publicly listed company, he should have bought shares in 2013. But right now, it is this arrangement. You have grown up in this beautiful house called Jubilee. Now you are off age. Now you need to move into your house in Roka and Kilimani.
That's fine. He can move out and he can get a new house.
And therefore, you help daddy and mommy buying some groceries and even paying for the Shamba boys and Shamba girls.
Oh my God, it's interesting.
But doesn't mean that you own the house.
But it's interesting because according to the Constitution, you have your president and your deputy. In that, their roles are very defined. There's the master and the person who must follow, the servant.
That's correct.
But in the party constitution, they are as equals. They are co-principals of this party. And in this case, to serve does not mean to follow. And I think DP is creating his own value within the party and saying, you know what, it's just as much mine as it is.
Someone has a right to ask, whose money did you use? I will not say who that person is.
It seems you know more than we might. Well, we have a 3-part criteria that we use to break down the headlines. We ask ourselves, is it topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And is it thoughtful or just plain lazy?
I think it's a great headline. It's very catchy.
And thoughtful. And quite topical.
I love it.
So we can pack it.
Yes.
Let's now move to the Star. Why Kenya may escape COVID-19 disaster. Is this true, 2J?
I don't think it's true. And for me, fundamentally, this is the problem with giving journalists scientific studies to understand and disseminate to the masses. They fail completely. This is, proof of irresponsible journalism and irresponsible headlines. So in this story, they're talking about how Kenya and Africa at large may escape the devastation caused by COVID-19 that has been seen in Europe. And they say this based on some evolving research which suggests that the virus may not spread as fast as in warm climates. This is all rubbish science, and I think that they fail to summarize aptly what these scientists have been saying. They use SARS as an example that took over the world in 2003. And they say that SARS did not disappear randomly when the summertime hit, but rather it disappeared because of aggressive public health interventions. And they use Canada as an example of a country that failed to maintain those public health interventions and then saw SARS come back again.
Yeah.
So I think that this was a sensationalist headline.
Yeah.
I don't think that this should be a reason for Kenyans to think that they can go outside again.
Yeah.
I think if you look at Singapore, Iran, Australia, 3 countries with very hot climate have also been hit very hard.
Very hard.
So.
And it's interesting. I think we're dealing with a pandemic in the era of social media. A lot of WhatsApp stories and things being passed along that you can't actually verify.
Yeah.
But for a whole newspaper to pick this up and then tell us we might escape,
wrong.
Not good.
Not good at all.
So do we pack it or keep it?
Toss it.
2M is so silent.
Toss it very far.
Okay, tossed. In the Daily Nation, when your country abandons you abroad. Now here we've been hearing stories of Kenyan citizens stuck in foreign countries, not being able to come back due to the high cost. The government has told them, you will have to foot your own cost to get here. We can facilitate planes and all that, but you'll have to pay for that. And you'll have to be quarantined in China 14 days and another 14 days when you come into Kenya. I think this is a case of the people versus their government. You have a government that, you know, is scared to make China mad. It wants to protect that bilateral diplomatic investment relationship with China, but China is behaving really badly.
Yes.
Yes, you're the biggest supplier, the world's biggest workshop, but you're really treating the global citizens quite badly.
Yes.
And I think they should be called out.
I think they should be called out.
This is embarrassing.
And I think, you know, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in my view, has 2 consents. The first consent is administrative, but second consent is political in nature. Now, they're doing the administrative work, which is well and good. However, politically, you must appear to also support your people. When you see the Nigerians summoning the Chinese ambassador and asking them, why are our people being treated like this? You should be able to do that as well. I think it is time African governments come together and say, I mean, we are the ones with the resources. These guys are coming to plunder our resources.
And 2M, it reminds me of what you were saying last week, how Germany gave China a bill requesting for reparations for this disease.
Precisely.
Where is Africa in the mix? I feel like we should send them a check as well, or a bill.
We should send them a bill. And you should send a bill, not because they should pay, but you want to leverage on the debt that you owe them. And get the money and stop being lamba types.
You're right. And interestingly, the Daily Nation mentions that the Kenyan authorities in Beijing may have leaked information of where Kenyan citizens are in China. And this is what the authorities are then using to target these people. And we hope that this isn't the case.
Really do. Yes.
So of the 3 headlines, which do we like? Which do we keep?
I'd go the Standard.
I would go with the Daily Nation, when your country abandons you abroad. I
like the Daily Nation because it's actually lifting the lid on a really crucial issue.
Yes.
So there we have it. Our Daily Nation gives us winning headline.
Yes.
Onto the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country, where we also have a 3-part criteria that we use to break down the to break down the cartoon series. We ask ourselves, is it humorous or dry? Is it satirical or pessimistic? And is it effective or just plain lazy?
You have Ndula, Nation, and there you have caricature of Uhuru Kenyatta. You have, I think, Ole Sapit, the bishop, archbishop, and a nurse in masks, and they are holding. Are you holding hands?
They're holding hands.
Yes, and the background is Kenyans partying away, and the caption there is COVID-19 loves weak links.
Yeah, I think this is in reference to the stories over the weekend, pointing out that the youth have become the weak link in the fight against corona, having curfew parties, using ambulances to ferry them from one point to another. I think it's an interesting cartoon. I still don't understand why they're joining hands to create a link when they should be social distancing.
But I think Ndula is also being lazy here, because it is not the youth that are spreading this amongst themselves, if at all that is true. Okay, statistically maybe. However, we have an entire period from 7 a.m., from 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. Where people are still doing business. Old people are doing business, young people are doing business. I feel, for goodness sake, corona can spread during the day. So I think let's cut some slack.
But this will be a sociologist's heaven, because you're trying to figure out, the psychology of young people during this pandemic, but also even old people. We're being asked to change the way we've lived and known how to live for a long time.
Precisely.
So in the Standard, what do we have?
You have Gado and caricature of John Pombe Magufuli, Tanzanian president. And the first window there is he's in his office in the face of corona. Second window, he has buried his head in the face of corona. Third window, he's praying to the gods in the face of corona. Fourth window, he is sleeping, morotaing in the face of corona.
And finally,
he is running away in the 5th window from Corona.
Yeah.
And I think what context here is that here Magufuli has taken such a long time to respond to this.
Yeah, but he's encouraging people to go to church, to pray.
But if Gado plays, he will be persona non grata in Tanzania right now.
Isn't he Tanzanian, in fact?
He is.
Yeah. I think also the context here was some conversations I saw on Twitter that Tanzanians have finally beat Kenyans at something. And it's not a positive thing to highlight, but it's the fact that I think in one day Tanzania had 84 positive cases and dozens of deaths. I think that now we're almost at par if they've not passed us in positive cases.
Okay. It's interesting. I like that he portrays Corona as being very angry, that Magufuli is not doing anything about it.
Attention.
That was quite funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so shall we keep it pocket?
Pocket.
Okay, in the Star.
In the Star you have caricature of William Ruto, and he is in between a maze of Jubilee Party and State House.
Yeah, the party house.
The party house.
Yep.
And the caption there is roadmap to State House.
Interesting. And we've seen this template before.
Yeah, we have.
Him also trying to figure out how to get to the big house.
Yes.
And originally, in the first one, in a state of idleness, I actually traced the maze to see if he makes it to State House.
And he made it.
He made it. However, this time, again, in another state of idleness, I traced it, and he does not make it to State House.
Oh,
so
man.
maybe the cards are not in his favor as well.
I like the commentary because, I mean, DP will need to get creative about how he gets to State House in 2022.
Yeah.
And does he think that Jubilee is the only way to get there? Will old maps lead him to new land? Can he create a new party?
That's a very good question.
Like
and even in the face of him saying that he will sit on a weekly basis at Jubilee to ensure things go his way.
And maybe that's not even where things are happening.
That's precisely the point. That's not the theatre of playing.
Exactly. The reggae starts at 7:01.
After curfew.
Yes.
After curfew.
Yeah.
Guys, so can we give Star our winning cartoon?
I agree.
Yeah? What is our final thought?
And now our final thought. It is inspired by a book entitled Originals, How Nonconformists Move the World by Adam Grant.
Yes. This week, as we continue to look at some of our Fifth Estate favorite books and see how we can apply it to this very strange moment that we're in right now. So this book explores how innovators see the world differently and how once they see the world differently, they're able to bring other people into their success. So conventional wisdom sometimes holds that people are innately creative. You're born with creativity, and if you're not born with it, you don't have it.
Right.
And thereafter, very few people have original thoughts.
Right.
But in this book, Adam Grant shatters all of those assumptions. He demonstrates that all of us can enhance our creativity.
Correct.
And he reveals how we can identify creative ideas and how we can then predict the ones that are going to be successful. And he tells us when to trust our gut and then when to rely on other people for support. So he says that great creators don't necessarily have the greatest expertise or the deepest expertise, but rather they seek out a broad perspective. And I think that's what we really try to focus on this table. And he gives examples of how success is not usually attained by being ahead of everybody else or being ahead of the curve, but actually waiting patiently for the right time to strike. And shockingly, in this book, you actually learn how that sometimes procrastination can be very good. So my favorite example from this book comes from a study that they did trying to figure out why some customer service agents stayed in their jobs longer than others did. So they had this huge data set. So he at first thought that people with a history of job hopping from one job to another would be the ones to quit sooner. But that wasn't true. Employees who had held 5 jobs over 5 years, that's 1 job a year, weren't more likely to leave their job as compared to people who had held 1 job for 5 years. So while looking for other hints, he realized that his team had captured information about the internet browsers that his employees were using. So he didn't assume to find any correlation, and he thought that your browser preference was more about a matter of taste, you know, what you prefer to use. But when he looked at the results, he was actually stunned with what he found. Employees who used Firefox or Chrome to browse the internet remained at their jobs 15% longer than those who used Internet Explorer or Safari. But he thought this was a coincidence. So he decided to look at the data deeper and find some correlations while looking at this in relation to absences from work. And the pattern was exactly the same. Those who used Firefox and Chrome were 20% less likely to miss work than those who used Internet Explorer and Safari. We'll come to 2M and ask him what internet browser he uses. And then lastly, he looked at performance to see how well they were performing at work. And again, the results were exactly the same. Those who used Firefox and Chrome had significantly higher sales and better productivity compared to those who used Internet Explorer and Safari. And so he found in the end that it wasn't actually the browser itself that was causing people to be dependable or to work longer hours or to succeed, but rather it's what their browser preference signaled about their habits as an individual. So he says, what made the difference was how they obtained this browser. Because if you own a PC, Internet Explorer is built into the computer. That's what you find when you buy it. If you're a Mac user, Safari comes pre-installed. But to get Firefox or to get Chrome, you have to demonstrate some resourcefulness to look for a different browser, to find what works better for you. So instead of accepting the default, you take a bit of initiative to find an option that might be better. And he says that it's that act of initiative, however small it is, that shows a window into how you work as an individual and shows whether you're likely to be a non-conformist, be an original person. I thought that was interesting.
Fantastic.
2M, what browser do you use?
Chrome.
I think he's a Safari guy.
He's a Safari user. He uses the default.
So it's interesting. He builds on this idea of procrastinating. So most of us have had to change the way we're living in this pandemic, and even the way we work. So maybe you have a little bit more time in which you're sort of just trying to find what to do. So he says that you should procrastinate strategically. And he apparently this encourages divergent thinking. So when you're generating new ideas, or you're in the process of doing a task or writing a book or doing something, he says stop before your task is complete. And he says by taking a break in the middle of your sessions or your brainstorming, you're more likely to engage in what he calls divergent thinking. And you give your ideas time to incubate. And he calls this the Zeigarnik Effect. So that tasks left undone stay active in your subconscious mind. So it's like leaving a tab open on your computer, now there's one in your brain. So as you go, you stop the task, you go off and do something else, but your subconscious mind is actually actively working on giving you good ideas. And he gives an example of Leonardo da Vinci, the famous artist, and how it took him 16 years to paint the Mona Lisa. So critics would be like, he's being distracted, he's wasting time, what is he doing? But in this distractions was the very source of his creativity, because all the while he was experimenting with different ways of drawing, different ways light hits paint and spheres and things like that to make this masterpiece that we now call the Mona Lisa. And then the second example that I took away from this book was seek more feedback from your peers. So he gives an example of Martin Luther King Jr. And the famous I Have a Dream speech. And he tells us how the process comes along. So Martin Luther King has 2 months to prepare this speech, but he does nothing. He literally does nothing. 4 days till the speech, at some time in March 1963, he seeks advice from his peers, and he says, guys, I have to be both inspirational and wise. What do I write about? They send him his ideas, he puts them in the back of his head, and he's cooking and trying to write this speech. He still doesn't write anything till the night before he is to deliver this speech. And it's about 3 a.m. and he still hasn't written anything. So he starts to write it, but there are many unfinished parts of his speech. When he eventually comes onto the podium to give his speech, somebody yells, "Tell them about your dream, Malcolm." And that's how he eventually incorporated that just spontaneously and said, I have a dream. And that sort of formed the cornerstone of what we all remember about this speech. But had he been so rigid and read his paper or teleprompter, or not teleprompter at the time, but read from his speech, he wouldn't have had the flexibility to incorporate the spirit of that moment. So I took away those two things. Seek more feedback from your peers, but stay flexible, and also procrastinate strategically, not indefinitely. So still work.
I love it. What I took from this book, guys, is why first mover advantage is a myth. And first mover advantage is whoever establishes first has monopoly and has benefit. Now, there are two sets of people. First, pioneers. Second, are settlers. And it says pioneers are the first movers. All right, they move in to ensure that they bid competition, but also create barriers to entry. Settlers are there, they just wait. They're slower to launch than pioneers. They wait for pioneers to start, and then they analyze them. And just when they see there is what they have learned and the small mistakes the pioneers did, then they move in. Now he says, marketing researchers, some two people called Peter Golder and Gerard Tellis, compared these two. And they found that pioneers were 6 times more likely to succeed than settlers. And this is because what pioneers do, they make impulsive decisions. They are very quick to dominate and close off the market. But what they fail to do is to realize the small dynamics that could make things change. And this also has to do a lot with the growth mindset, taking advantage of factoring the factor, the factor of failure. failure, right? And also doing dry runs to ensure that things could go wrong, or just to see how things, or simulate how situations could go. But I also want to ground this to our local reality. You see, there are two mobile telcos in this country, and they're the biggest. Is Safaricom, and then there is Airtel, what formerly known as Kensel. Now, in the year 2000, Kensel had a massive head start in front of Safaricom. They started doing mobile phone services 6 months when Safaricom was just a mere department at Telkom Kenya. Now, what happened was they had two strategies. They had strategies, both of them. Kensel went for top tier corporate. They went for the corporate because it was easy money. You know, as a fast mover, you want to collect the basket, collect the goodies from the basket where it is easiest to do it. Safaricom had a different strategy. They went for the bottom of the pyramid. They went for the Watus, where the money actually was. It was harder for them to dominate. It actually took them 6 years to start dominating the market. Right now, Safaricom controls 63.5% of the telco market in Kenya. Actually, their valuation is 1.13 trillion shillings, meaning that for every 10 shillings Kenya has right now as a GDP, Safaricom owns one bob.
Wow. It's good to know.
Incredible.
It is good to know. So on a day where we had a winning cartoon from the Star and a winning headline from the Daily Nation, I want to leave you with this. The reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable man persists in trying to adapt the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable. So may we always be unreasonable as we try to advance society.
Beautiful.
Kindly subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't, but also find us on TV. We're on GoTV, Pang Free to Air, and Star Times. Have a lovely evening.